guys, Jack here, and welcome to this little extra video for Mummy Month. Now, I wasn't originally planning on doing this, but given that we're ahead of schedule and Mummy Month is pretty much done and completed, in fact, I'm rendering the 2017 review as we speak at the moment. If you can listen carefully, you can hear the engine running. So I decided for this little extra Friday on Mummy Month, I'd do something a little different and give you guys essentially a behind-the-scenes mini-documentary on the making of this marathon. This is something I don't normally do with my reviews, but outside of bloopers and occasional live streams when we're filming, I've always kind of wanted to show you guys what it takes to make videos like these and the amount of effort that goes into them. So for the final Friday of October for this Halloween, let's see what it took to bring this marathon to life. This is the making of Mummy Month. Alright, ready? I'll tell you when. So give it about 5 seconds and then say your line after I say action, okay? Okay. First and foremost, I should point out that this production actually began all the way in 2019, October to be exact. In fact, the first thing we shot for Mummy Month was the opening sequence of the first episode, with me and Brad opening up the FDT to summon the Mummy Emotep. Now, given release dates, we were originally going to put Mummy Month in October of that year, but then other complications came in the way, so unfortunately that was off the table. So then we thought, okay, no worries, we can put it out in 2020. But then the pandemic happened and it pushed back even more massive productions. In fact, all of our big productions actually got shut down for about a year. We're only now starting to get back into the game finally. So given we were kind of starving for content and we couldn't predict what the hell was going to happen during this pandemic, we said, well, screw it. We've already filmed portions of Mummy Month, we might as well just get it out and over with. Now, the original production was actually going to be a hell of a lot bigger in concept. We originally were going to have the Magi involved and have a bunch of cosplayers and extras dressed as Magi fighting in the final battle. But again, due to COVID restrictions, that concept eventually got scrapped. But we do have a couple actors handy who actually do want to play Magi in the future, as well as a pretty decent actor who does a really awesome Out of Bay cosplay. The first thing you need, obviously, for any video production is a script. Now, because this is both a review and a fan film, I actually not only had to write these reviews and talk about my pros and cons on each film, but also had to write a storyline surrounding all these movies. So the concept pretty much was that Emotep is revived through the power of the fictional dimensional transporter and brought to our world, and my character has to stop it. Pretty simple plot, all things considered. Now, normally, I can write a few scripts in about a month or so, and they actually gave me some peace and quiet away from most of the chaos regarding filmmaking. But then it's all about visualizing the damn thing. Nowadays, we actually do a lot of storyboards and animatics on stuff, but in this one we did kind of wing it in some regards. Again, these videos started production in 2019, and I knew the opening scene had to mimic the likes of Frankenstein and the classic Universal monster movies, and how appropriate, because the night we shot it, it was actually raining and thunderstorming, which made the environment so much more alive with the sequence. I also gotta point out a couple of shots here that were actually by complete accident, but actually look pretty artsy. Like this one with Bradley as the Igor character, with half of his face being lit green and the other half being normal lighting. It kinda has a bit of that Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde feel to it all. Now, when it comes to the review portions, it's normally just the typical setup. Just have myself sitting on the chair with some cool stuff in the background, so I do try to add as many Easter eggs as I can per every episode. Now, because of the pandemic and a few other complications here and there regarding production, something I've learned about filmmaking is that whatever your full 100% ambition is, you gotta cut it back to about 50% given realism and expectations. So there were a few contentions here and there, but one thing we actually did manage to do was shoot at the Royal Ontario Museum for the Mummy Returns episode, and that alone was actually pretty fun. But what's funny is right before we started shooting in the Egyptian Center, the entire fucking camera suddenly went into a really slow motion frame rate, and it took us about a half hour to fix it, which really spooked us out, but once we fixed it, we got on to working right away. Now, one good thing that COVID actually gave us a chance to do is the ability to wear masks inside facilities, which would suck, but it allowed us to have production go a lot faster, given we didn't have to worry about dialogue until ADR, or additional dialogue replacement, and pretty much dub the scenes in, given we were wearing masks and you can hardly tell. Now, we were originally going to go in that tomb to shoot, but obviously COVID blocked it off, so we had to come up with a different solution when we started filming. And one of those ideas was actually to recap from a previous set of reviews with the Star Wars trilogy and then the establishment that my character can actually use the Force. And it's one of those things you don't really think of when you're shooting or let alone writing, but given the circumstances, it actually gave us a brilliant way to recap previous episodes and be like, oh yeah, my character can do that. Why doesn't he do that more often? One of my favorite movie quotes is from the original King Kong with Carl Denham, where he says,
I found out from experience always to keep my cast and my cameras right with me. Never can tell when you'll want them.
So I always carry a camera around wherever I go, and usually try to occasionally get some good B-roll in case I want to stick it in something later on. So when we were at the ROM, Brad and I got a bunch of B-roll of the dinosaur skeletons and some armor and all the Egyptian stuff just in case we need it for future projects. It's something I'd honestly encourage any filmmaker to do. Now the helicopter shots, believe it or not, I actually shot myself. The first one, being the close-up, was actually taken from my trip to New York like 10 years ago when I was getting background plates and elements from my Kong remake. And I have a ton of this B-roll lying around, so I thought, might as well use it. But the shot of the helicopter approaching the cloudy skyline, that was pure fucking luck. I was making a delivery and I was at this really nice park that oversaw the entire city of Toronto. So I grabbed my camera and thought I could probably use this as a location shoot. But then I saw the storm clouds rolling in and I'm like, oh, I should probably film this. It has that sort of dark feeling and it's all natural. And it just came out so well. And as I was filming, wouldn't you know, a frickin' helicopter flew by. So B-roll like that actually came in handy in making that whole sequence even more cool. Now, the whole talisman plot that I do in the exposition scene in the museum was part of the original script and concept that involved the Magi, and I didn't want to let that concept fully go, so I decided to write it in the exposition scenes. Including the talisman, which I won't say what we're doing with it, but it's gonna come in handy in a future review. Now, when it came to part 3, one of the highlights of the episode was my distaste for the recasting of Rachel Weisz. Now, this joke actually spawned from an episode of The Simpsons where Homer just screams his bloody lungs out, but I wanted to take it a step further. Maybe a little more than a step further. Pretty much going into the multiverses and universes surrounding my show. And this was a good chance for us to not only expand on the world of my show, but also give a couple of cameos to some pretty awesome special guests. A huge shout out to the likes of Nick Jackson of Jackson Knight Productions, who does some amazing live stream reviews, JTISREBORN, who I'm actually helping his show out, Brock McGinnis, aka Indie Fan, of Fandemic, which, guys, go watch his show. It's actually really cool. He reviews a bunch of fan films. HEWY TOONMORE of HEWY's Animated Movie Reviews, who makes a cameo through the multiverse dimensions, as established in his show. And 2 voice actors who did such an amazing job as both Krillin and Android 18. One being Gord Coyle, who does an awesome impression of Sonny Strait's Krillin. But of course, what is a BigJackFilms review without Android 18 in some way, shape, or form? So major shout out to BAETEEN on YouTube, who, next to Meredith McCoy, does easily the best Android 18 voice I've ever heard. And I always love getting a chance to work with her. She's been on the YouTube scene for quite a while, and she's honestly worth checking out. Now this is of course where we get to some of the highlights of the episodes. The amount of awesome monster effects, which I'm not gonna lie, was not just a challenge, but a fun challenge. One of the biggest struggles I have as a filmmaker and a special effects guy is the constant need for practical special effects. If it's in front of the camera, it's gonna make the experience so much more real. Now, obviously, we had our mummies, that was a given, but because we were low on extras, that meant a lot of green screening and copy-pasting in all sorts of areas for some of the shots. So yeah, that's me in all the mummy costumes, just interacting in green screen practically to nothing and just using my imagination and deciding later on in post-production where I can stick these creatures in. It was a lot of fun, and I had Bradley on hand to assist me, and funny enough, we were watching Rosario Vampire Season 2 while we were filming, which made for some good reactions that I'll stick in a blooper reel later on. The other special effects we had handy was, surprisingly enough, a lot of digital effects. Specifically stock CGI effects. There's a ton of this stuff on YouTube, and you can pretty much utilize it however you want. It actually makes for some pretty interesting shots if you can frame and render it right. For example, I shot the closing scene in the first episode of Mummy Month with Imhotep breathing the flies on me, and to be honest, I had no idea how I was gonna pull that off. But thankfully, there's some stock fly effects you could get on YouTube, and I just stuck that into the compositing. The sandstorms were a little bit tricky. I had really no elements to play with regarding sandstorms and dust particles, aside from a few little ones. But thankfully, somebody on YouTube did upload a ton of sandstorm digital effects, and they came in handy really damn well. A couple other digital effects we had to do, especially in the battle scenes, was of course split screen technology. This is where if you're low on actors and you only have one, you can do what's called split screen, where you shoot the same angle, you film your character in two different positions, and then you composite and stitch the two shots together to make it look like one shot. It's a pretty interesting effect that I started doing in my Mask of Zorro review, and to this day, I've had a bit of fun doing split screen. Hell, in this one, it was even more of a challenge, because it wasn't just two characters, it was three characters with the metahuman control guards. And then of course we have our main star of the reviews with the mummy, Imhotep himself. And I'm not gonna lie guys, creating this costume was a huge process. Because I've never dealt with much undead costumes regarding my filmmaking skills, so a lot of this was new territory and was really fun and challenging to do. The main issue with the mummy was how to design his face. Did we want to go with full prosthetic makeup, a mask? Did we want it to be a skeleton? Did we want it to be fleshy? We couldn't really decide, but we ultimately decided to do a hybrid of a suit and a skeleton. And thankfully, a lot of our sources came from not only my parents' place, but also the dollar store. Now, I'm gonna be honest guys, I'm kind of a cheap-ass filmmaker, so anything I can make from the dollar store is definitely welcomed. And at the time, it was definitely appropriate because Halloween starts extremely early when it comes to retail stores, so we stocked up on whatever we could at both thrift shops and the dollar store. We decided to use a thin plastic skeleton mask to create the main face of Imhotep. And one of the things we actually did do was add a little bit of paper mache to the mask to make it a bit more like the bandages and the flesh were still stuck to the creature. It was kind of cool to dye and glue this stuff all together. In fact, all the bandages Imhotep wore, we actually just took a bunch of white and beige fabrics and dunked them in a giant soup pot and dyed it with tea bags, dirt, and whatever we could to give it that sort of ancient mummy look. Afterwards, we just dried them off, and we basically stuck it on the costume. Now, most people would think, oh, did you use toilet paper? No, I'm not gonna do that except for wiping my ass. And on top of that, it's a huge environmental issue. And let me tell you, one day's worth of shooting that costume, it could take about an hour to an hour and a half to put all that on. It's a real pain in the ass. But hey, it looks great on camera. One other thing I decided to do was give, obviously, the mummy some ragged robes to make him more like how he did in the first film. And that technique was used the same way we designed some of the Dark Lord's fabrics by buying some bed sheets at the thrift shop and actually burning the edges and so on with a blowtorch or a lighter. I learned this technique actually from a documentary on Disneyland and the making of the Pirates of the Caribbean show where you see a guy taking a blowtorch to the sails of the pirate ship. So I thought, hey, I could probably do the same technique. Again, the gloves were just simple rubber gloves that I got at the dollar store that were part of the Halloween season, and they fit the tone of the costume pretty damn well. Overall, I was really happy with that build, and I think I made for a pretty terrifying mummy. And as we got to part 3, we have to talk about the battle scenes, and I'm not gonna lie guys, I love making these kind of sequences. So I was pretty much experienced on how to create a battle sequence such as this, especially for a mummy movie. And I overall think story-wise, it turned out for the better. A lot of shooting the battle sequence was just myself with Brad just shooting a zapper and coming up with a few video game jokes and improv, which I'll show in the blooper reels. My primary weapons of choice were a knockoff Nerf shotgun, which actually looks pretty damn cool, and of course my Sword of Light, which is just a replica of Undriel from The Lord of the Rings. But most of you may not have noticed this, but when I was jumping around and falling, you'd think I'd probably break that damn sword. Well, surprisingly enough, we actually did something new this time around in creating an exact replica of Narsil, but as a foam rubber sword. This is a common practice mostly used in stunt work and filmmaking, that most actors don't use the steel prop weapon they're given. They're mostly given a stunt sword that allows them to sustain injury and not get hurt. The sword was actually one I bought at Medieval Times a couple of years ago, and I just covered it in aluminum tape to match the look of the hero prop sword. So in shots of me jumping, which I actually did jump off that roof for real, and I did hurt my knees doing it, but thankfully I had a mattress handy, I was carrying the foam sword the whole time. Which, by the way, yeah, there was a lot of jumping and falling and tumbling and running in these episodes, weren't there? Most circumstances, you don't see me doing this kind of stuff because of the safety involved, and given the fact I'm not the most fit person in the world. But I actually managed to invest in a sports mat that always comes in handy when you're doing stunts. It's always good to be prepared when it comes to safety. Hell, when I shot the battle sequence, I actually cut myself with my own hero prop sword because it was jabbing into my finger. So you always want to be prepared with medical kits in case. Now, filming Imhotep in the fictional dimensional transporter was a bit of a pain in the ass. The first time we shot it was in 2019, and it was me in the mummy suit just constantly going underwater and coming out making it look like I've risen from the dead. But let me tell you, trying to swim and go underwater in that suit, especially with the mask, was absolutely terrifying because half the time I couldn't see anything, and second of all, there was a chance with the mask that I could probably drown. Thankfully, that wasn't the case, and those shots actually came out pretty damn impressive. The second one was a tad bit easier because we were shooting in the day and I could actually see, but one thing we've actually been incorporating from previous reviews that we've been really experimenting with is, of course, slow motion. And a lot of these shots, including some of the jumping and stunts, were actually filmed on my phone in a high frame rate, which did shoot in HD. The demise of Imhotep and sending him back to hell was actually done as a homage to Terminator 2 Judgment Day, and you can kind of see that in both the way it's shot and the soundtrack. One of the things I've actually been really doing a lot more of with the destruction of minions is creating almost dissolves or explosions for them when they're defeated. I tried a new transition effect that kind of made it look like the Thanos snap, but to add that in-depth feel, I actually added some sand effects in the foreground to give it that extra feel of relief. Now, the Department of Metahuman Control guards were a simple costume. It's just a black shirt, black pants, black gloves, black boots, some black Harky armor, and a black motorcycle helmet. Pretty easy to do, and kind of gives them that Stormtrooper feeling. The plasma guns they use are actually just a Nerf Stampede that I spray painted black. Now, I would say more about the shocking ending in the 2017 review, but I don't want to give too much away just yet, and play out the story as we go along. I know some people are like, wait, that's it? That's how it ends? What's gonna happen to Jack? Well, you'll have to find out in future reviews. Because if you were attached immediately to Mummy Month, chances are you will like the rest of our show as well. So go check out the playlists and the storyline compilations. Now, once production wrapped, obviously came the editing. Now, a lot of people ask me what I use for editing, and I just use Pinnacle. I know it's a primitive software and it's kind of laughed at nowadays, but on my end, I've been using it for so goddamn long that it gets the job done. The majority of my time was spent not just on the review portions, but also compositing all the special effects. And creating visual effects like these is essentially like creating a sandwich. You want to make sure all the layers are right and you've got enough of the textures and enough of the condiments handy that it's going to overall look delicious when it's on frame. Or when you're having lunch on the go. What? I'm hungry. And it wasn't just compositing the shots, but it was also color timing each individual element to match the sceneries. It's something you always want to be careful of when you're shooting special effects shots, is having the lights match the backgrounds. And other than that, the sound effects are just mostly in my library. Some of it was elements from the movies themselves, but some of the sound effects were taken from my library that I've been collecting sound bites on for about a decade. Also, it's sort of a tradition in my action videos, but you can't do one without putting in the Wilhelm scream. That thing's just classic. One of my favorite shots that was actually sort of a last-minute detail that we added as a visual joke was the duck hunt joke. Thankfully, somebody actually had the duck hunt graphics on a green screen and did some keyframe animation on that one. And outside of sound effects in my library and sound effects used in the movie, I do occasionally like to use sound effects from a lot of animes, and if you listen closely to the sound mix in the final battle, you'll hear a couple of classic anime sound effects. The final process in the editing is the music, and in this case, it's sort of like how you edit the clips together in a review to avoid copyright detection on YouTube, which for a lot of people is a pain in the ass. One of the tricks I use to get past copyright on YouTube and still have the same music and tones as the movies I'm covering, I mostly just use cover tracks. And thankfully, with the Mummy movies, there's a ton of people who have done cover tracks of all the music from the films. So if you want to know who the music artists were who put all the songs together, I'll put a link down below to all the channels I borrowed from. and this is sort of an extended thanks to them for doing the awesome work that they do. The last thing I want to actually point on is the closing credits. I decided to do something a little new and different compared to other closing credits on my shows, and give it its own unique flavor. So not only did I change the font to be more Arabic and Egyptian, in fact I think this is the same font they used in Aladdin. The background is actually a screen grab of the screen-used prop of Hamunaptra used in the film. If you look closely in the credits, you can see all the details that were on the map. But aside from that, that's it for the making of Mummy Month. And to tell you the truth, I'm glad to be done with it. By the end of it, I was physically exhausted, spending 2 months non-stop dawn to dusk, hell, sometimes days without sleep getting these videos out. I have a lot of passion for making big film reviews like this, and it gives me something to do and something to share with my audience. And I'm overall happy with the final products that came about. Are there some stuff I wish we could have done if we had bigger ambitions and less restrictions? Yeah, but I'm not gonna let it deter me. There's always a next time for this kind of stuff. And I want to say a major thank you to everybody involved who helped with this production, especially those on Patreon. If you guys want to go support the channel, just $1 more will get you access to all of our content as well as other special features. And your contributions really help keep the lights on and keep our productions going and finances. So again, a big thank you to all of you for watching Mummy Month. I overall had a great time making these and sharing it with the fans and subscribers of my channel. And let me know your thoughts overall on Mummy Month in the comments below. I love hearing feedback from you guys. But other than that, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this making of documentary to get a little bit more of the behind the scenes knowledge of what it takes to make these kind of episodes. So until the next video, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys later. This is BigJackFilms signing off, saying thanks for watching Mummy Month, and happy Halloween 2021.